So Fast Like a Girl, it's ready for pre-order now. I hope this book changes your life the way the information has changed hundreds of thousands of women that have applied it. From the bottom of my heart, enjoy and let's get healthy together. Let's hop into this though. I love interesting people. And when I researched you, one of the things, I'm an ex-athlete, as is Jessica and many of the people in on our team. And holy cow, you have an impressive field hockey story. And the question that I have for you is 13, what was it? 13 years at Princeton as a coach, and you only lost 4 games.
Yeah. In conference. Yeah.
Okay. What did you do different? What is it that gave you the superpower of winning like that?
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's a great question. I think there are a few things at play that really did provide a bit of a competitive advantage. I think number one, just our framework in terms of how we thought about learning and development was potentially a little different. We were really just frankly so engrossed in our own learning, our own development. We kind of, this whole notion of competition we were almost like immune to that. Like it was really never about the opponent for us. And I think what happens in conference play is you create all of these rivals, right? Like where one game is more important than another. And we kind of, in our thinking about, how we wanted to be as a team and how we wanted to approach the game, kind of philosophically, we thought more about, how do we just get better every single day? How do we control our own behaviors in a way that helps direct our thoughts and attention in a way that is going to help us be a better version of ourselves. And, this isn't just about the techniques and tactics of what's happening on the playing field. Of course, all of that really matters, but it's really that time away where you're tasked with having to make a choice that's either going to kind of upgrade or downgrade your capacity. And I think that's the framework that we kind of approached the team with, and how we centered our education was very much around, this concept of self-rule. What do you need to know about the physiology and the psychology as it relates to your motivation and effective effort and, your attentional capacity? What are the big influencers? And building a framework around that was really our foundation. And I think we probably did that better than anyone in the country, frankly, if I can
obviously
say. I just
your statistics speak that.
I do think that had a big that foundation I think that we laid had a big difference, and just taking that concept of our opponent off the table. That wasn't really for us a consideration. It was how do I step on the field and really impose my will on the opposition, and what does that mean about my choices leading up to that moment, and how do I need to think about the game tactically? We had very interesting tactics in that we're always trying to score, right? So we kind of made our framework of what we're trying. Everyone on the field was always trying to score. So every decision that we evaluated was this a decision that could lead to a goal? and that informed how we defended, how we attacked. So we had this very, very simple task orientation that everyone on the team could latch onto, and that gave us a platform to be able to evaluate how we were going. So we had, a couple of things like that in place that I think were big differentiators for us.
Amazing. I can't help but make a parallel to what you're now doing with Whoop. And a lot of what we've been trying to do in our community is get people to stop looking at measurements like the scale or other measurements that may not be helpful to understand how their body is performing on a day-to-day basis. Like we have entered this whole new world of healthcare where we can see performance on a moment by moment aspect and really analyze it and decide what we want, how we want to make different lifestyle changes. And one of the things about your past that really is interesting to me is this idea that somewhere I read that you said that physiology and psychology are more important than skills. And if you could elaborate on that, because I think if you asked me what it takes to be healthy, I feel like it's not your genetics. It is how you treat your body and your mindset. It's coming at health from a very similar approach that you came to athletics. Can you kind of dive into
Yeah.
what you meant by that statement?
Yeah, I think the thesis around that is that, we all come to the table with a certain type, we have a genetic code, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
relatively, not something that we can change, right? We all come to the table with some skills and expertise and knowledge, and it's definitely influenced and nurtured by different levels of coaching or mentoring. The folks who you're around on a daily basis, kind of I think can certainly amplify that. But I think whether or not you can leverage your genetics and your skills and expertise is largely based on how you manage these physiological and psychological components, right? That gives you the platform to be able to really optimize your genetic and your skills and expertise, like whatever that potential is. And that's always, when I talk to professional athletes and tactical athletes who are already really elite, top surgeons in the world, I'm already really good. What can you really offer me? Well, what I can offer you is that you might be leaving something on the table, right? If you're not considering your lifestyle in an intentional way, and you don't necessarily know what to measure, what's important, how to apply your effort in an effective way, what's influencing your motivation on a day-to-day, if you can't answer these questions, you're really just, your chances of performing consistently are diminished, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the opportunity is, all right, how do I, number one, kind of really, kind of take this notion of flow or the zone that's, arbitrarily, I'm hitting it arbitrarily, like every now and again, kind of take that off the table and think about this from the standpoint that performance really is a choice, right? If I can effectively manage these psychological and physiological variables, I know what they are, and I know how to build a framework around it, I can consistently leverage my genetic and my skills and expertise in a way that is optimal, right? Wow. So I do think, this is very much, and this has been the basis of my research for the last 20 years, has really been around this notion of kind of quantifying the zone, there's no guesswork. And from in my point of view, having been around the best athletes in the world and having oceans of data and, having done this for as long as I have, I feel really confident that performance is largely a choice. And if we understand the factors and we can apply, a bit of discipline and a bit of effort, and we know how to focus our attention, there's no reason why you can't perform consistently day to day. There's no reason.
And I would say on that, we also, for the everyday person, the person who's not like trying to achieve amazing things necessarily in their life, they just want to have optimal health. What I'm seeing with Whoop is that you guys have put together something amazing for people to take where they're at and amplify their performance in life. Is that kind of the slant you came at with Whoop?
Yeah, I mean, I know when Will Ahmed, the CEO of Whoop and founder, who's just an extraordinary human being and has just this amazing vision for the product, always has. I remember one of our first conversations is, while this started, at the tip of the spear with the most elite athletes on the planet, and really thinking about this product from a training and adaptation standpoint, how do we help folks train optimally? It has really evolved to a product that is for everyone. I know, yep. Mindy, you're a former athlete. I was a former athlete, but shoot, right now I'm a mom. I'm trying to look good, yep. Naked, and live as long as possible. Like, those are my goals, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But really it's about being available. It's about showing up with as much, presence as you can. And, that's how I really evaluate my success is, can I show up for the things that matter to me, right? With a level of presence and clarity and attention that feels good, right? Like those are my values, right? And for me, a path to that is understanding how I'm adapting to external stress. And that's what Whoop measures, right? Like, we help folks understand how you're adapting to external stress. And without that knowledge and without that understanding, it's just really hard to understand how to apply your effort, right? Like, I don't have a million, hours that, like, none of us do. We're all busy, right? And I think what what Whoop does is it really helps you understand, okay, where is my sleep? Okay, I'm not getting enough time in deep stages of sleep. How do I fix that? Right? We help you with that. We give you
Yes,
that
you do.
intel, right? You know, is my strain consistently exceeding my capacity? Am I overtraining? You know, we tell you that. Like we tell you what your capacity is. And if you are experiencing a downward trend, you know, in your metrics, you know, looking at resting heart rate and heart rate variability and, you know, the Whoop recovery algorithm, if you're consistently on a downward trend, something is happening, right? And you can start to ask more intelligent questions about your behaviors and how they might in fact be influencing those markers that we track.
Yeah.
So it's just a really good opportunity to use data as a human being to just be more present in your life.
Yeah. Oh, I for sure. I've had Whoop now for about 3 months. So we started with a group of my staff, and we all created a team together. And I'm going to give a shout out to Jessica's husband because he has been like the papa bear of the team. He analyzes all of our HRV. And he, you know, it lists every day like the order in which, I don't know exactly if it's based off strain, but his HRV is ridiculous. Like his HRV goes up. Jessica, what was like the highest was like 150 or something. I'm like, I'm just trying to get mine to 50. So what is the highest, Jessica?
Yeah, I think he's gotten like 180 or something.
Yeah. So I asked him, and I did two things. One, I joined another group because I was like, I need a group of women that are my age. That, like, I'm not going to compare myself to a 35-year-old man. I need to figure out but he did something really smart. And I think this is how you designed the band to be, is that he's a Spartan racer. And so what he wanted to do is make sure his workouts were not his biggest workouts, were it aligned up with what the strain coach told him to do, what his recovery was. Is that how that's how you guys designed this to be?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And that's really the strain coach feature. You know, that's the genesis behind strain coach, is really helping you understand, you know, what do I have in the tank? You know, what's my capacity? And really helping you understand, you know, how much harder, how much further you can go, based on, you know, what you have in the tank. And that's really, you know, staying in that sweet spot of training is really, you know, how you, you know, how you optimize, you know, how you really make the best fitness gains, you know, is really mapping, you know, that exertion level with, you know, and making it in line with your capacity.
Awesome. And so the goal is not to get the highest strain number that you possibly can in a day.
No. And a lot of things influence, you know, your ability, you know, so if I come to a workout and I've got a 14, you know, % recovery, then I'm probably, I have a super, you know, high volume, high intensity workout, I'm going to have, my strain's going to be through the roof because my body to do that workout is having to work so stinking hard that, you know, I'm basically going to have a really high strain, right? Because my cardiovascular system, my, you know, my muscles, my CO2 capacity, all of that is going to be, all of my biological, you know, functioning is going to be compromised, right? Because I don't have, because I'm under recovered, right? For whatever reason. So I'm not going to be able to adapt to that stimulus in a functional way, in the way that someone who is coming into that workout with an 80% recovery, right? We could do the same exact recovery, be the same exact age, use the same exact weights, and you know, the person with the lower recovery is going to end up with a higher strain. So it really is, it's fitness level, it's age, it's, you know, it's all of those things that influence, you know, what your strain ends up being. But certainly going for the highest strain is not necessarily, you know, it's a more complicated matrix than just simply, getting the highest strain. That really doesn't mean a whole lot.
So are you seeing big changes? Like, you work with a lot of competitive athletes, a lot of NBA professional players. Are you seeing that they are learning how to hold back in their workouts so that they don't push themselves on a day that their body wasn't ready for that?
Yeah, we definitely see that starting to play out more. I mean, you hear this term load management, right? Like, it's hilarious because I was thinking about this a decade and a half ago, because I was using all sorts of technology to kind of understand, you know, capacity. But yeah, so there's definitely been I think the last 4 or 5 years, and I think Whoop has had a huge piece of has really been a huge piece of this conversation, is really helping folks understand that if your body isn't primed to adapt to a stimulus, you are not going to be able to get the benefits of that workout. Like your body simply doesn't have the resources to allocate to accept that and actually use data to better understand how to maximize training opportunities. And that's at its core, what Whoop is just really, really good at helping folks is, hey, this is your capacity. This is how much load, volume and intensity you can take on to meet your desired result. And sometimes, if you're trying to get fitter, you would expect to see a suppression in heart rate variability and an increase in resting heart rate, right? That means that your body's actually responding and adapting to the volume and intensity that you're putting on. But if you are simultaneously taking on that volume and intensity, not getting sleep, drinking alcohol, eating like crap, not getting hydrated, your body isn't going to be able to accept that stimulus. So you kind of have to really live right if you're in fact trying to functionally overreach, as measured by, heart rate variability, resting heart rate. You can use those metrics to really understand, if you're in that sweet spot of functionally overreaching versus maladaptive type of training effect, right? But you got to really live right in order to kind of make those gains.
That's revolutionary thinking, because when I played college athletics 30 years ago, the idea was you just pushed yourself every single day and you just did more and more.
More. I know.
Literally, it took the strain coach. It took Justin showing me on my Whoop, like, look, your strain coach will tell you how hard you're supposed to work out. And I'm like, really? That's a whole nother idea.
I know.
It's crazy. So I want to go through some of the things that you guys analyzed, because we have a lot of questions on it, and I want to help our audience get the most out of Whoop. Like I said, what we're starting is a group. We call it the Resetters, and we're starting a group that we'll be able to see what happens to everybody's sleep and HRV, resting heart rate when we fast together, because we'll have, imagine thousands of people all doing the same fast, and then we can start to analyze the data. So we're geeking out on this with you. Yep. So let's start with sleep. Okay, what's more important, your total sleep or deep sleep and REM sleep? Like, Jessica can get her sleep performance to 100% like every day. I can't, but I can get my deep sleep over an hour. And sometimes the other day I went 2 hours and 23 minutes in my deep sleep. What should I be looking for at sleep? Is there a piece that's more powerful than others?
Yeah. Well, so just to break it down. So sleep performance, the number that you see in your Whoop app, is basically just how much sleep you need versus what you actually got.
So Jessica's listening to her Whoop.
That's your sleep.
What you're telling me.
Yeah. So Whoop is telling Jessica, hey, you need to spend 8 hours in bed. She spends 8 hours, she spends enough time in bed to basically fulfill, the time that she spends in actual sleep meets whatever the recommendation that Whoop puts out. So that's the, that's that percentage that you get. It's that ratio. So in terms of what's most important, your body is going to drive your need. Okay. So how much time I need to spend. So don't think about it, how much, REM versus slow wave sleep, both are really important. The amount of time, the percentage of time that you're going to spend in REM versus slow wave sleep is really going to be driven by what your body needs from a restorative standpoint. I think it wouldn't be too out of line to say that, the harder you're working out, the more your body is going to drive towards slow wave sleep, because that's the time where you have the physical restoration. If you're just cognitively really, I know days where I'm working a ton and really having to apply my brain power, I end up spending more time in REM. So I don't, and I think that the science is not super conclusive on this, but I think we can say conclusively that your body is going to drive your need. So you want to think about, on the Whoop platform, you want to spend about 40 to 50% of your total time in bed in these deeper stages of sleep. I think that's a good goal to shoot for. So if if Whoop says that I need to spend, roughly 8 hours in bed, of that 8 hours in bed, I really want to try to spend at least 30 minutes on only, less than 30 minutes awake is kind of what I'm hoping for. And I can tell you how to get there if you
Yes,
want.
please.
The other bit is going to be light. And then the rest of the time, so roughly, 3.5, 4 hours, I'm hoping that will be divided in some way, some, percentage of 40% of that time will be in these deeper stages of sleep. So that's kind of how we think about it and what we consider optimal on the Whoop platform.
I interviewed Dave Asprey. Do you know Dave Asprey, the bulletproof? Yeah. So I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago, and he's quite a character. And he gets on the ready for the interview, and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to be amazing today because I just got 3 hours of deep sleep." And I was like, how did you get 3 hours of deep sleep? That's crazy. So, and what I know about sleep is that deep sleep is where your brain detoxifies, and that's where you actually, your brain, the brain will shrink, and the cerebral spinal fluid goes up and washes the brain out. So the deep sleep is something that I've always been watching, but my other sleep is not as good. So I haven't been paying as close of attention to those. When you say, how do you, go ahead.
Deep sleep it's split into, so there's 4 different kind of phases of deep sleep. So we just characterize it as, REM and slow wave sleep, like that's, and then we give you percentage of time that you're spending in both. So slow wave sleep is the physically restorative time period. That's when you release human growth hormone. I think, almost, in fact, like 95% of your human growth hormone is released during slow wave sleep. So, it's an important piece of the puzzle. And that's where, the collagen is produced, all sorts of things are important things are happening during that time frame. And in REM is when, amyloid protein buildup gets released. So you're talking about this brain detoxification that happens during rapid eye movement. All of these stages are important and central and have a different function. And I think just, to note is that, sleep is it's a highly active process. It's a lot going on, so it's really important that we put ourselves in a position to actually, capitalize on all of these stages, right? And that, very much is tied to our daytime behaviors, not just what's happening right before bed, but really the moment that we wake up, we need to start thinking about how my behaviors are actually going to influence my sleep, because they do, the things that I'm doing during the day are either going to kind of help my ability to get into these deeper stages of sleep, or they're not. So thinking about it in those terms, I think is really important.
A couple of things we've noticed is that if you eat dinner and then you go to bed, like you wake up the next morning and your Whoop is like, you suck. Like, I'm
telling you, you are so spot on. I mean, we've been observing this in the data for years, right? So this is a recommendation that I've been pushing with my athletes for years, that we've been working with, because we've seen that's so obvious in the data when folks are eating, within a couple hours of bedtime, it has such a almost the same influence as alcohol, not quite, but the wrong content and quality and timing will 100% influence your sleep in a very similar way to alcohol. And it goes back to this process that, sleep is really active. And when you're asking your body to digest it can't digest and recover at the same time. It just can't do both of these processes. So it's going to allocate all the resources toward digestion. It's going to do that until you're fully, digested. And then it can focus on REM and slow wave sleep and all these other processes that need to be happening. So you end up basically, as you've seen in your data, and as all the folks on the platform have seen, is that you basically end up with a much more fragmented sleep experience when you're eating because you're, having to do both of these things at the same time, and you can't do that. So, the resources are going to go toward digestion first, because that's just how the body works.
Has been so motivating for both my husband and I. We're eating dinner early. The two of us are going to bed early, like all from Whoop. We're like, oh my God. And the other day, my parents were over and I had to kick them out of the house. I was like, you're going to affect my Whoop score. You need to leave now. And it's because it definitely gamifies that piece for you.
It really does. I think exposure to that data and, just the elegance, I think, of the UX and the UI, like just the way just our product folks are just like out of this
Awesome.
world, and just get better every single day. But yeah, I think the behavior modification, I think that is
Huge.
just literally the biggest differentiator of anything else on the product is that on the market is that, we're not just, we're helping you understand how to modify your behaviors so you can get the outcomes that you want in your life, whether it's to, lose weight or, it's to get fit or, train optimally or be healthy. Like we can help you do all of those things. Right. And because we're going to create this really robust foundation that allows you to efficiently layer on these other protocols that you can then, really capitalize on, whether it's, exercise protocols or nutrition protocols. But really at the foundation is just some of these core things.
My 20-year-old daughter is in college and she was having trouble waking up to her alarm. So I got her a Whoop and I was like, let's look and see where you're in deep sleep. Like same thing. It just has really worked on helping her understand how she can control her quality of sleep. So I would agree with you on that. And it's just been just before we leave sleep and jump into HRV, which is my favorite discussion. How much of a time period between dinner and going to bed do you think is best for sleep performance?
I think 2 to 3 hours is a good buffer between, and then, and you said it, I'd be remiss not to mention it, but, sleep consistency is kind of the most important behavior as it relates to, in addition to a cold, dark, quiet room, very important as well, but that's more on the hygiene side. But in terms of an actual behavior that really drives time in deeper stages of sleep, it's the regulation of when you go to bed and when you wake up. You just want to make that as consistently as humanly possible. And it's amazing. Yeah, we've done, we've seen this manifest in the data, with kind of enterprise type folks where we have access and we're doing a lot of analyzing, but we're doing some massive research looking at, this concept of resilience, and the number one marker that predicts resilience of our members is the degree to which they go to bed and wake up at the same time.
Wow.
So it's kind of emerging as like the canary in the coal mine as like this single most important behavior that helps. I think that really is the key to kind of longevity and health and, immune function and, staving off disease and mental health issues. Like sleep-wake timing, it sets your circadian rhythm. It just basically, just is the most predictable kind of cue that you can give your body that, tells your biological kind of systems what they need to be doing and when they need to be doing it. And it's really probably the best, the most important behavior that people can latch onto, I think, if they want to see immediate results.
That's so powerful. Okay, let's go into HRV because this is the one that has baffled me. Yep. So everything I've read, it's the scale, just to fill people in, it's a scale from 0 to 100. And everything I've read is you shouldn't compare.
Recovery is 0 to 100. HRV is not.
I thought it was 0 to 100. What's the range on HRV?
So HRV can be. There's no real range.
Yeah, like Justin's went up to 180, 150. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very unique to each individual. It's dependent on heart size and age and genetics, and all those things are going to influence like what your kind of max heart rate variability could be. So that's going to be different. And your behaviors kind of leading up to the moment that you get on Whoop and you actually start to understand or realize what your heart rate variability is, how you live your life, how you've lived your life previously, did you smoke? Have you drank a lot of alcohol? I mean, all those things are going to kind of impact like where you come in at. And then obviously how you treat your body thereafter will dictate whether or not it improves or declines. So behaviors.
Yeah. And this is why I want to, because I have some interesting behaviors that we've been trying to unpack with HRV. But the first thing I want to just be clear on is you're not supposed to compare your HRV to anybody else because it's unique to you. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's really just, social comparison in general is not super healthy, but definitely as it relates to HRV, it's just not the correct way of thinking about the marker. It is you against you 100%. And it's, it's like when you get on the platform, it's like, all right, this is my HRV. I'm just going to try to adopt behaviors that are going to improve my HRV, because we know that better HRV bestows, the more variable your heart rate, right? The more variability you have, the more adaptable you are to external stress, the more capacity you have to adapt to external stress, right? So the less variability, the lower your heart rate variability, the less capable you will be able to mentally, physically adapt to your environment. So it's really in all of our best interest to have as much variability as possible so we can optimally respond.
So the higher the number for you, the more your body is able to adapt to stress. Would that be your nerve? It's really your cardiovascular system and your nervous system.
Your nervous system.
Okay.
Yeah. So heart rate variability, it's a function of the heart, but it originates in the autonomic nervous system. So you kind of alluded to the fact that your heart is always like it's you. The more healthy your cardiovascular system, the more responsive it will be to the demands of the autonomic nervous system. So you've got the parasympathetic and the sympathetic branch of the nervous system, right? They're both competing to send signals to your heart. The more recovered you are, the more responsive your heart will be to both inputs. So if I need to activate, my heart's going to be responsive to that demand because I'm really well recovered. If I need to deactivate, my heart's going to be responsive to that demand because I'm highly recovered. The less recovered I am, and we measure that with Whoop recovery, right? We give you, that's the scale of 0 to 100. The less recovered you are, the less responsive your heart is going to be to those demands. So when I need to deactivate, my heart's going to be slow to deactivate. When I need to activate, it's going to be slow to activate. So you really want a balanced autonomic nervous system, because that is that's going to be measured, or that will be a higher heart rate variability is basically going to be a measure of how responsive your heart is going to be to both inputs, and is really reflected in a more balanced autonomic nervous system. So all of the behaviors you want to deploy are ones that are going to help bring balance to the autonomic nervous system.
So then is it fair to say if you're trending low for your heart rate variability and stress is high and you feel like you're not handling stress very well, that the one way you could handle stress better is to play with the lifestyle factors you can work with to bring the heart rate variability up so that you're handling your stressful environment differently?
Without a doubt. Yeah. And then I would say one of the biggest influencers on heart rate variability is because this behavior, I think, influences your sleep as well, and your sleep onset latency, kind of how quickly you're able to fall asleep, is really the degree to which you're able to buffer stress with appropriate amounts of rest during the day. So this concept of autonomic control is really, frankly, in my opinion, is kind of the keys to the kingdom, right? If you can control your autonomic system, you could pretty much tackle whatever you need, right? Because you're going to be responsive to the demands of your environment, right? You're going to be able to react in an optimal way. And reacting in an optimal way, whether you're trying to, get out of the way of a moving car or, or give a great presentation, it bestows a survival advantage, right? When you have, when you can be responsive to the demands of your environment. So, one of the ways to kind of help facilitate that is to really take control of your stress during the day. And the simplest way to do this is to just deploy some very simple breathing techniques where you consciously bring your heart rate down. So we call this deactivation, right? And this is because when you're activated constantly, that's when you end up with this chronic kind of sympathetic chronic inflammation. Because you're releasing cortisol, you're probably not sleeping as well as you can, even if it's subtle and you don't really perceive it. You're probably not getting the sleep that you need because you've got this inflammation, you've got this chronic stress that you're not managing and dealing with. It ends up manifesting in subtle ways, but one of the metrics that can track it is heart rate variability. So one of the best ways to mitigate that is to deploy breathing techniques proactively throughout the day. And it doesn't have to be forever. We do it, you do it for about a minute. It takes about a minute for the vagus nerve, which is the path to the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system. It takes the vagus nerve about, a minute to 90 seconds to pick up on lung expansion when you're doing intentional breath work, and it releases acetylcholine, which is the chemical that tells your heart rate to decrease. So that takes about a minute to 90 seconds to happen. So, all you have to really do is, just breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, wait 4 seconds, do that for 90 seconds. And all of a sudden you're buffering stress with appropriate amounts of rest, right? And that's just simple. Yeah. I mean, it's super simple, but what happens when you don't do that is you get what's called this negative stress accumulation, right? And when you have negative stress accumulation, that's when, you're ruminating on stuff, you're lying in bed, you're thinking about your day, you haven't been proactively kind of, taking care of yourself, really is what this is. And then even if you're so in sleep that you fall asleep quickly, you'll end up with a much more fragmented, nighttime sleep experience than if you were actually buffering stress and rest.
That actually is the most helpful thing I ever learned on HRV. And we're now going to try that because my understanding was that it's like you're going into this parasympathetic state technically at sleep. So I was thinking that it was everything leading up to sleep. But a couple of things that I've noticed is hydration. So hydrating during the day, and even I'll take it even one step further. I started adding in some minerals into my water, and I all of a sudden saw some strange, and I don't know, it has magnesium in it. So I don't know if the magnesium was making, but my heart rate variability went up quite a bit. The timing of when I eat before I go to bed also not only affected sleep, but it affected heart rate variability. But I'd never really, I was looking at everything prior to sleep, and what you're saying, I love this idea of the buffering, like just having moments of parasympathetic activity is going to make a big difference. And that's what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And water stimulates the vagus nerve, right? So, water solves a lot, frankly. Like water is amazing, right? There's so many good things from boosting your metabolism to your skin health and all that. But yeah, water actually in the gut, cold water stimulates the vagus nerve. So and which is the path again to parasympathetic activation. Yeah. But yeah, the gut is and you're finding this, the gut is obviously is a huge piece of the puzzle, right? What we're putting in our gut is going to really influence our autonomic control and what's happening from an autonomic nervous system standpoint.
One of my favorite books is called Accessing the Vagus Nerve, and it has all these little hacks for your vagus nerve. And one of them is like gargling at night.
I know, gargling, laughing.
So maybe good. I'm going to try some of those little tricks and see if that changes HRV.
Definitely. I mean, I'm a huge Seinfeld fan. I love it. And I literally will just I'll watch a 5-10 minute clip or whatever and just laugh my ass off. And right there, it's just, so laughing is a huge,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. Huge piece.
I love it.
The puzzle.
Okay. What about resting heart rate? So, and I specifically want to talk a little bit about it in terms of COVID, because there are some things that you can see, and I had heard that resting heart rate was one of them, that when your resting heart rate goes up, and your respiration rate goes up, those two can be indications that you're either dealing with COVID or you're dealing with some infection of some kind. And I know there were studies that originally, when COVID came to all of our attention, that they were using technologies like Whoop to see if you had been infected. Is that still an accurate statement?
Yeah. Yeah, so we actually just published a paper on this, and it's pretty epic. Just the fact that we were able to actually see in respiratory rate that and that ends up being, I think, a more specific marker of COVID than in fact resting heart rate. Because if I'm non-COVID sick, my resting heart rate is going to increase, and my heart rate variability is going to decrease, right? Respiratory rate is going to stay pretty stable. It's actually not going to move a lot. When I'm COVID sick, my heart rate variability is going to decrease. My resting heart is going to increase, just like a non-COVID sick would, right? So these are non-specific markers, but respiratory rate jumps off the map. In a way that it doesn't for a COVID is a lower respiratory tract infection. So your respiratory rate only seems to move in those times, right? It very rarely is going to move for anything other than a lower respiratory tract infection. So, so that's what I think has been so novel, and what we've been able to contribute to the world in these times is that we are the only wearable device that has, third-party validation around respiratory rate, and that is the key marker, the marker that moves the most in the presence of a COVID-19 infection. So if you see, we track this in recovery, we track it in sleep as well. And, all you do is you click on your respiratory rate. We've got a band. If you're outside the band, that's when you self-isolate, monitor your data. And, if it persists, definitely get tested. And we have obviously just tons of stories, but the recent peer review breaks all this down and kind of shows that, for 20% of the cases, 3 days prior to symptom onset, we can accurately detect COVID.
Amazing.
And 1 day after symptom onset, we're detecting accurately 80% of the time. So it's really, I know, it's a pretty amazing kind of feat, I think, for our data science team to kind of be able to uncover these insights and then obviously be able to push it through public, peer review and get published is really pretty incredible for us. But yeah, respiratory rate is really the key marker you want to track, just because it's specific. Resting heart rate is non-specific, in that your resting heart rate could just be drinking alcohol. It could be, it's going to be impacted, whereas respiratory rate doesn't change.
Okay. So when you say it goes off the charts, it's not like it goes up by 1 or 2 points. You're saying it goes up by like
17% relative to your baseline is like the average increase in what we've seen with folks who are COVID-19 positive.
And are you guys are you looking at this? I mean, this is what I want to go back to my community and say, okay, so until we have testing at home, that's really easy. This would be a great way, if you've been exposed, to understand if your body's fighting it off. Is that how you guys are looking at this?
Yeah, definitely. And certainly, it doesn't replace testing by any means, but, because of the strength of, of what we've seen in the data in terms of what actually happens to your respiratory rate in the presence of a COVID-19 infection, it's a great extra layer. There's no reason why you shouldn't be monitoring this data point. And if you do see substantial increases, it could be non-COVID, but you definitely, that is a moment where you absolutely would want to self-isolate, keep track of your data and seek testing as soon as possible.
It's beautiful. Okay. Other questions that we have are, what about like the EMFs on it? If I put it on Bluetooth and it's just like reading me throughout the day, do we know if there's any EMFs that are coming off of it?
Yeah, we found nothing deleterious related to that. I kind of plead the fifth a little bit in that I don't know. I don't think there's enough testing around that, frankly, to say something conclusive. But from what I understand and the knowledge I have and the conversations that we've had internally, there seems to be nothing dangerous about, Whoop and the interaction with these other frequencies.
And does it matter? Like, because of my knowledge, I'd put it on Bluetooth all day, and then I just pair it before I go to bed, and I pair it when I get up. So it's not on Bluetooth so my phone and my Whoop are not pairing with each other all day. That won't change the data at all?
No, we can collect up to 3 days as long as it's charged. We'll collect up to 3 days on your strap. So you can be away from your Bluetooth for 48 hours, and reconvene. It will take a little bit.
It does take
some data latency. It'll take a little bit to load, but that's fine. But yeah, that's I think an awesome feature that we were able to kind of store that data for you. Like, you're not losing a second of data. It's all there, and when you reconvene with your phone, we'll get you started.
Yeah, my phone decided to take a hiatus on Monday, and I'd done everything right to get a good sleep score. So I was so excited to wake up Monday to see, and then my phone was broken, and I kept remembering like what you guys had said, that like it'll store it for 24 hours. I'm like, okay, it's stored in there. I'm just going to take a deep breath. It's all going to be okay.
Yep. Actually, for 3 days. For 3 days.
3 days. That's amazing. That's amazing.
3 days.
Okay. Does it matter what arm you put it on?
It doesn't. No.
Okay.
Does not matter.
It should be on top.
In fact, I definitely recommend at night. I always I change wrists. I literally, as soon as I get in bed, that's just like my routine. I just so I'm not on the same wrist all day. Yeah, that's my little routine.
Yeah. And your guys' band thing is really cool. Like whoever thought that up, please give them our compliments, because here in my office, we're all like, oh, do you see they have a new band? Like I got last night at 9:00, one of my docs in my office sent me, oh, did you see these bands? So you definitely have made it really fun that way.
Our design team is just like next level. They're so good. And this ProKnit is just like, it's just really good technology. You know, like it sounds so trivial that, you know, just like, oh, it's just like a band, but this is like some serious technology to like be able to hold to the skin in a way that isn't uncomfortable, that feels kind of breathable, but then enables a good signal quality. Like, holy cow, like they really just, they're just, I can't speak highly enough about them. They're just unbelievable.
Yeah, you guys did a great job. My other question on just logistical kind of things is these groups that you've created. That is also amazing. And like I said, we have a group of my whole staff that's in one group, and now we have all our resetters in a group. Is there any way to chat to each other within the group? Because we've been trying to figure out how to point out if somebody could say, hey, my HRV went up today. This is what I did. We could have a really cool interaction.
100%. We definitely want to build that. It's something we're thinking about. We're talking about. We've got, you know, tons of feedback from folks, you know, wanting a feature inside the community. So yeah, that is definitely, we're marching toward that 100%.
Okay.
We know how powerful that would be and how important that is. And yeah, and to be able to have those conversations like, oh, I'm you know, testing out cold thermogenesis. Like, you know, this is what the impact it seems to be having on me. It's the only thing I've changed. And, you know, my heart rate's up 20 milliseconds, or my, you know, heart variability is up 20 milliseconds, you know, things like that. Like that kind of banter back and forth can just accelerate wisdom and help people like really dial in on the behaviors that are actually most efficacious as it relates to, you know, kind of improving your situation.
Yeah, we have in our clinic, we have a bunch of biohacking, like we have a hyperbaric oxygen, we have a PEMF machine, an infrared sauna. So we've all played with those pieces. Like we're like, if you go in the hyperbaric, what happens to your HRV and your deep sleep? If you go on the PEMF, so cool. And we found that actually it's not 24 hours later, it's usually 48 hours later that we start to see some changes. Do you feel like it takes time? It's the repetition of all activities in order to see a change. It's not necessarily one thing.
Yeah. I mean, some of your habits, you know, there's no question about it. Like, I think it all, you know, just kind of the average of what you're doing is gonna add up and kind of help you or not. So I think in principle, like, you know, most of these interventions that we're talking about are not going to do harm, right? And it is difficult, to your point, to isolate which one is really influencing, unless you're kind of doing a more controlled experiment. But that's where a lot of the research that I'm doing with external partners, you know, to look at the influence of CBD, the influence of CBD THC, the influence of float tanks, you know, what does infrared sauna do? And in creating kind of a controlled scientific experiment, you know, that will go through peer review and that's properly executed. So we can start to unpack, like, you know, what are these behaviors, right? That we can really help members understand are most impactful on average, you know, and people are still gonna have to do a bit of experimenting, but we'd love to be able to distill that down for you and provide that knowledge. We actually have this and really incredible study with Stanford University. I don't know if you know Dr. Andrew Huberman.
I do. If you have a chance. Yeah,
I
follow him on Instagram. Yeah, love his work.
Yeah. He's just like such a star. I just like love him so much. But anyway, he's just such a great source of knowledge and so bright. And but we're doing we have a study right now. It's actually in analysis. But we're looking at heart variability measures during breath work and different types of breathing protocols along with meditation as a control and understanding its influence on sleep architecture. So we actually have quite a few insights in terms of what is most efficacious as it relates to helping folks get into deeper stages of sleep. So we'll be able to provide some of these insights. Yeah. So anyway, a lot of the external research we're doing is really trying to unpack everything you're talking about, from infrared to, you know, to float tanks, to all these different modalities that exist that that have an influence on heart rate variability and sleep.
Okay, last couple questions because I know you got to go, and I just saw my computer's about to die, so we'll make this quick. Okay, tell me what you know, like you personally, when you look at your Whoop in the morning, what are kind of the biggest drivers that you use?
Yeah, I definitely go to my sleep first, and I look at, how much time I spent awake.
Okay.
That's and I think one area that I'm actively trying to manage is my sleep debt. If I keep my sleep debt below 30 minutes, I know that my chances of illness and injury burden go down like 100%. Like in all the observations I've had in the data over 5 years, looking at tactical and elite athletes, if you have less than 30 minutes of sleep debt, you're pretty much bulletproof. I haven't been sick in 4 years.
Wow.
Like 4 years.
And you have kids? Did I hear you have kids?
I have 2 kids.
Well, how old?
I have 2. 13 and 12. They're 18 months apart.
Okay, so when they were little, that was hard to affect. Your sleep debt had to be.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, I wasn't actually, when they were young and not, at an age where they were, still, their sleep was still inconsistent. Yeah, I wasn't actually tracking, unfortunately, but
right.
Yeah. So I got to wait after they had, stable sleep, and yeah, so I was fortunate in that regard, but yeah, I think,
so you guard your sleep. You guard your sleep big time. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my family they laugh at me, but their sleep is dialed in too. I think we're all on board with
That's awesome.
Sleep for the most part.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but
okay, and then you've had some really interesting people that you've been analyzing their Whoops, some professional athletes. Who's the most interesting, and what have they been able to accomplish from just understanding their Whoop?
Oh, that's an awesome question. I think what's hard is, we generally can't reveal,
right,
who we're working with, so it's hard. But I have a funny story with one of the NBA athletes I was working with. He came onto the platform, and he'd been on for a couple weeks, and he texted me. He's like, "Hey, can you check my data and let me know what you think?" So I look at his data, and I'm like, dude, like, you're waking up like every single night for like a couple hours, like, what the hell's going on? Like, literally, he'd like awake. So he'd wake up, and then like the next part of his sleep would be either sleep again or it was a nap, but never had consolidated sleep. And he's like, I wake up with the night sweats. I have my whole life. I'm like, what do you mean you wake up with the night sweats? And so I was like, so of course, start asking the obvious questions of like, what are you eating? And sure enough, I mean, the guy would have like a bag of Sour Patch Kids and like a bucket of. I know. The worst diet on the planet. No. And this guy, he'd been in the league for 3 years.
Wow.
And was operating at like literally half his capacity.
Wow.
Like, I'm telling you, I mean, he's already so good. Like, that's what, like, it's like, what are you actually leaving on the table?
Yeah.
And this guy is so good, right? Like, he played a lot of minutes and, had some injuries here and there, but for the most part was doing okay. But once we fixed his nutrition, and the guy started actually, it's the first time in his whole entire life that he actually slept through the night.
Wow.
Like, just by fixing this one thing that he literally had made no connection.
Yeah.
No one in his life had made this connection for him.
So cool.
So I think it changed his life. He ended up making the All-Star team, and for the first time in his career, was basically went from like doubled every category of, in terms of assists and steals and rebounds and points and free throw percentage. Like, it just all got better, like literally within weeks. Like, it was just like the most insane. So I think that for me, like, was like one of the like coolest things I had been a part of.
I love that.
Guys, one of my baseball players, I'm, super close with to this day, but, this was like, 3 years ago, was really low HRV, was on all sorts of medications, like sleep meds, and just like cold turkey, just quit all of that and just stopped drinking alcohol, just like dialed everything in, and, ended up extending his career. He's an older athlete. Really, I think ended up giving himself probably 2 more years in the league that he wouldn't otherwise have had he not like dialed in on all and, used the data to really inform some of his behaviors. So that was a really cool story. But
I mean, all that from this is what I'm seeing in my family, is that just us all tracking it, we're like making changes. It's so cool. Okay,
know.
what about mindset? So I want to kind of end on where we started, which is who's inspired you the most when it comes to mindset? I don't think you come out of the womb with the mindset that you have. Somewhere along the line, you learned to have that kind of mindset. Who's been the most influential for you?
I would say two individuals that I met back at the University of Iowa, I think were most central in informing kind of my thoughts around performance education and just how to think about the physiology and the psychology. They were just so ahead of their time. Dr. Molly Marty and Dr. Lockett Stewart, they were PhD students at the time, and I was working inside the athletic department. I was on I was an Olympic, athlete, so I was playing on the U.S. national team and competing. And anyway, I got kind of funneled to these folks, or I met them, and I ended up being a research assistant for them, and worked really closely with them for like 3 years, and that was really my foundation around performance and just starting to think about performance in a more intentional way. But just from everything from being able to kind of actually define performance and understanding that our mindset, our ability to have a growth-oriented, positive mindset is 100% contingent on how I sleep, how I recover, how I train, how I move my body. It's contingent on, the extent that I have purpose in my life, that I, feel like I have the skills and resources to do what's asked of me. Do I have control over my day? Mindset doesn't just appear for us, right? Like my ability to access my mindset is contingent on how I manage these physiological and psychological variables. Right. And if we're not helping folks understand that, we're just missing the whole the whole foundation. Right. So
amazing.
I think,
especially
I think
this
they
year,
were really cool.
Especially this year when anxiety is so high, for people to see what they can control is so powerful.
Yeah.
So
it's hard to talk yourself into a better future, when you're not, when you don't have this framework.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Last question, then I'm gonna let you go. If you had one message for the world that you could get into everybody's brain, what would that message be?
Go to bed and wake up at the same time as often as humanly possible.
Love it. I love it. That's awesome. Well, thank you, Kristen. This literally, I've been, you've been on my calendar for weeks, and we've been gathering questions, and we just love the Whoop. So please let everybody back at your office know how grateful we are. And we will reach out about fasting, because we have so many people that are trying the different pieces that we'd love to be able to share what we're learning.
It would be so fun to do just a little observational study, get some understanding around these different types of protocols, and see, what works for men and women and what the differences are. It would be really interesting.
Awesome.
So just bring me up when you're ready.
Okay, we will.
All right,
okay, thank you.